Is loving your work the same as losing yourself? Gen Z is facing a lot of misperceptions about their work ethic. A lot of managers and business leaders are perceiving Gen Z as lazy and really challenging to work with. Gen Zs are being quoted as quiet quitters and bare minimum Mondays and productive theatrics. And basically, it's all to say that we are perceived as lazy, entitled, and not putting in enough work. But I really want to clear up the misconceptions about this because I think that Gen Zs are very ambitious and are very passionate, but it's in a different lens than it was previously. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Clearly Becoming, a podcast all about empowering ambitious individuals, especially in their 20s, to navigate their chaotic career and life in general. And remember that you can be ambitious and confused at the same time. This episode is going to be all about what is the meaning of actually working hard and working obsessively, and knowing the difference between the two, especially in your 20s. And I got inspired to do this episode because I just watched The Devil Wears Prada 2. I'm not going to spoil any of it, but I also rewatched The Devil Wears Prada, the original one. And it just got me thinking about the idea of work ethic. And there's this quote by Nigel, and he says, "When your life is hanging by a thread, it means that you're working. And when your life is about to go up in flames, it means you're ready for a promotion." And this was really funny to me. For me personally, working hard is something that I aspire to do. It is something that I have been brought up by. My parents are in a little bit of a later generation. They're in the baby boomer generation, and they've always viewed that work was life and that this is what you're supposed to do. And it's not to say that I don't value the importance of having life outside of work. And I have multiple hobbies, and it's actually shown that Gen Z is one of the main things that they want to do is travel in life and really experience things. And I myself am a huge advocate of traveling, and it's something that I always think is worthwhile to spend my money on. And so I definitely do think that there are different aspects to life. And I constantly talk about the pie chart of your life where you have your career, your relationships, your health, and your social, things that you want to do, and more so, whatever. I could get into that later. But I definitely do think work is a huge bit of my pie chart, especially in your 20s. I think one of the most frequently talked about topics with our generation and people in their 20s is career and relationships. And this is just because this is the things that are uncertain in our lives right now. And it's something that we're really developing and focusing and prioritizing at this moment. So when I rewatched this movie, it got me thinking about, is it inherently bad to be working hard? Is it inherently bad to be like Miranda or Andy or Emily and really prioritizing their work? I'm just going to give a tidbit about Miranda Priestly. She's basically the Anna Wintour of Runway, this fashion magazine. And basically, she is known as the Dragon Lady and who is all consumed by her work. She doesn't care about what other people think. Her opinion is the only one that matters. She works to the grave. Her life's goal and her ambition is to work. And this is what fuels her life. And because of that, she has to sacrifice a lot of other things along the way, like her family and relationships and social connections and things like that. And so basically, I wanted to ask the question, is Miranda Priestly a cautionary tale, or is she just honest about something that most of us won't admit? Throughout this film, there are three archetypes, and is Miranda Priestly, which I just kind of talked about, and Andy Sachs, who is the new assistant, and Emily, who is the previous assistant, who has been working for Miranda. And basically, Miranda, as I said, work is the point of her life. She knows the cost and she owns it. And she's also driven by intrinsic motivation. She has standards and she lives up to them no matter who else is watching. She doesn't care for that external validation. She knows who she is. I mean, to a point, she does care about the external validation. And then Andy is seduced by this excellence and this fashion and this glamour world. She wanted to be a journalist, then she goes into Runway and she becomes this fashion girl. She previously didn't really care about all these clothes and everything else, but then she really prioritizes her work at Runway and being Miranda's assistant to the point where she neglects her relationships, which causes her a lot of pain and also just a little bit of chaos in her life. But then towards the end of it, she reclaims who she wants to be and she realizes that she really wants to be in journalism, and she doesn't care for putting other people down just to get ahead. And that's something else that I wanted to look into a little bit later and maybe do future episodes on, is competition and what that actually looks like in the workforce and the moralities of it. And then we have Emily, who's the other assistant, where her work is just her pure devotion. And she has no self really outside of job. But this, unlike Miranda, it's driven by external and extrinsic rewards. Her job is basically contingent on her self-worth and proximity to power. She uses this job to elevate herself and be perceived as somebody who's important. And we can really see that throughout her, I get to go to Paris Fashion Week and you don't. And so it's not really about fashion itself that she loves, but it's the feeling and the rewards and the perception that she gets from it. When I was watching this, I was like, which one do you kind of resonate with? And I definitely feel like in this podcast, I'm always talking about really being aligned to your values. And that's how you can make decisions that are more sustainable and with who you want to become. And I really feel like in this film, it really talks about is being confused and exploring. And that's exactly what Andy does. She explores an industry that isn't known to her, and how, when you're from the outside, how you perceive it, and then how you can get so ingrained into it and lose yourself in the process. And that's what I really wanted to focus on, is loving your work the same as losing yourself? Because she did love her work and she did have that drive and ambition, but she lost herself in the process because it wasn't aligned to who she was. So then she went back into journalism. But the question is loving your work and being passionate about something the same as losing yourself in the process, like Miranda, because she really loves her work and she's lost her other facets of her life in the process of it. And to tie it back to Gen Z in this modern day world, I found this from a survey from Deloitte, which surveyed Gen Z and millennials, about 4,000 plus individuals, I think across 44 countries, which is insane. And 89% of Gen Z says that purpose-driven work is really important to them. And also 44% have quit their jobs because of a lack of meaning of their work. And then 41% say that identity is tied to their work. And they also have this trifecta where, in terms of work, what is driven by is meaning, so purpose, finances, money, and then also well-being, having that work-life balance. And so what I feel like the trend is towards employment in 2026 is not trending away from devotion, but it's trending towards a different version of it, this passionate-led portfolio style work where your values really have to be aligned to what your career is in order to sustain it. And basically, it's like a personal brand that never turns off and shuts off. It's tied to who you are in multiple aspects of your life, especially in your career. And I really feel like this is true because I recognize it in my family a lot. A lot of our work has been driven by passion and what we want to do. My sister is an artist. The other one is in the design world. It's just a lot of passion driven work that we're doing, which I think is so cool. And I think it makes your work have a little bit more meaning towards it and connection because you're so driven by something that is value aligned. And so I think the risk isn't working hard. I think the risk is mistaking intensity for meaning. And so not noticing the difference can really cause that tension and that burnout in the end. To add a little bit of neuroscience and psychology towards it, because I love talking about that, and that's all about what Clearly Becoming kind of is this dopamine loop, which I talk about a little bit, is where when you have that stimulating work is the same, it uses the same reward pathways as compulsive behavior. And I definitely have felt this. I have a little bit of a compulsive tendency and obsessive tendency that I always have to kind of check in with myself, because while it is good and it helps me get a lot of things done, it can veer off the path of being a little bit too much addicted to it. And there's always two ends of the spectrum, and it's never great to be too heavy on one side. It definitely has had impacts on my health and well-being. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that as well. There's the saying of everything in moderation. When we have this work, it's the variable feedback and it's the little rewards that come from it. And it's really hard to stop. It's like just sending one more email or one more job application or one more comment or one more praise. That becomes like a slot machine at a lottery, which becomes really, really addictive. And so we can see this definitely in the film. While she may be disciplined, she's also just wired into this dopamine loop of constantly having this recognition and feeding her passion for fashion in a way. And then it also goes into this identity foreclosure bit, which Erikson, a psychologist, talks about, where instead of exploring different facets of who you are and who you are, you become really fixated on this one thing. And that's what happens when you tie yourself to one role, one job, and where the importance of your 20s is to continuously explore. And that's what I talk about a lot, of being curious. That's something that I want to do. And when you commit too early, you really close yourself off from experiencing so many different areas and versions of yourself. And you arrive at, yes, being excellent at one thing, but not really knowing who you are. And especially if you tie yourself and then you lose it because of, a job layoff or something that happens in the economy, then who are you without that job? I also want to talk about passion or compulsion, which I sort of talked about a little bit beforehand, is that there's a difference between harmonious passion when your work energizes you and you feel so fulfilled by it, but you can also set it down. You can spend one Sunday afternoon doing something else completely. You don't have to always be working on this thing. And then there's compulsion, where you are energized by it and you can do it forever and ongoing, and you're basically in this flow state, but you can't put it down. It is all consuming and it controls you. And so I feel like in this film, and I want to just bring it back to this film because this is what inspired this episode, is that I feel like Miranda is, yes, she was harmoniously passionate about fashion, but then she went into the kind of compulsion and obsessiveness of it. What happens is that the brain can't really differentiate between this passion and compulsion because it's hitting the same reward system. And the cortisol, the stress level, is basically the same, whether it's, your passion of work, for her runway, or your cause to believe in it. The meaning behind fashion as a language and a communicator and perception. And it's also that thing where you can kind of get trapped on the hedonic treadmill, where every single time you succeed at something, it kind of raises that baseline of what success is, and then you adapt to it. And it feels like there's no end to this, like, success and where you want to achieve. And so you're constantly on this treadmill of just like wanting to achieve more and more and more. So that's where I feel like Nigel's quote in the movie, that really keys to this topic, because it's like the reward is always moving and you don't arrive at it. And that's what workaholism is. It's structurally reinforcing who you are as a person. And this is why I feel like Gen Z can really get into this trap of workaholism, especially because we are attaching a lot more purpose and passion to our careers, because it's a little bit harder to spot than just what work was maybe in the past. Gen Z is having a lot more side hustles and doing a lot more TikTok or Instagrams and a lot of content creation, which is so cool because we have this ability to monetize our hobbies and do things that previous generations couldn't beforehand. But it also feels like if we don't do it, then it's betrayal to our identity and to our passions and our hobbies. What I wanted to really emphasize in this episode is not to focus on working less. I definitely think you should do things that you're passionate about and keep on doing them. And yes, sometimes you do need to make sacrifices in order to achieve it. But I think I wanted to ask more questions to make sure that what you're doing is aligned to who you are and that you're not losing yourself in the process of it. And so these are kind of the three tests that you can make sure that you're not losing yourself on the way of building your dream life and what you're creating. Is number one, can you set it down? Can you set the work down? Not permanently, just for like a Sunday afternoon or just for maybe a weekend or even a Friday night. Go out the bar with some friends or go out to dinner or, do whatever makes you happy. Go for a pottery class, go for a bike ride, who knows? And this really helps to see, is this a harmonious passion or is it compulsion? And I definitely feel like I draw the line between compulsive behavior. And so this is a really good test for me. And then number two is, who are you when your work gets taken away? Who are you? If, say, you got laid off tomorrow, are you still going to be yourself? Are you still going to be okay? And basically, this tells you how much of your identity is tied to one thing, in one pot, in one basket. Who we are shows up in so many different facets. I know that I hold multiple identities. And it's not to say like I'm not the same person in the different aspects of my life, but I definitely show up a little bit differently. And thing holding me together is my values. But yes, career Hazel Ann is definitely different than friends Hazel Ann, and it's definitely different from a family Hazel Ann. And I think that's okay to have multiple identities whilst having and holding the same values. And it's not to say that I have a fake facade for each of these personas that I am, but I do think it's okay to show up a little bit differently in the different aspects of your life and not tying yourself down to one thing, because that's what I talked about in the identity foreclosure. And that's why I think a lot of postgraduates have this identity crisis, because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm no longer a student, because that's what they tied their identity to. And it can happen equally in the job force. This is my role, this is my career, this is my position, and who am I without it? And so making sure that you have a balance between who you are and it's not just tied to one thing. And number 3 is this a choice that you've made, or is it one that has happened to you? And I feel like in this movie, Miranda owns it. She knows that she's a dragon lady. Andy gets there. She realizes that she wants to still be in journalism. Emily, I feel like, just never asked, because all of these things in her job is so contingent on her self-worth. And so the difference isn't worth ethic, it's authorship. It's making sure that you're making choices that are aligned to what you want to do and who you want to become, more important. I really want to reiterate that working hard is not the same as losing yourself, but in your 20s, it is imperative to know the difference. And I know this was maybe a little bit more of a different episode than I normally do, because it is kind of inspired by a film, but I don't know, I think it was just a really interesting topic to me, and where Gen Z is heading in the workforce and how our identity is tied to it, and what it does it actually mean to work hard in this era of employment and economy. So I just wanted to finish off, as always, with a little bit of a clarity round. And one of the things that I'm letting go is redefining what productivity means. And from this film, I really think Miranda is a cautionary tale, but also an invitation to really acknowledge, are you choosing this life for yourself, or are you just letting it happen? And a reminder to make sure that you're the one choosing it. And that ties into, who am I clearly becoming? And something that I'm auditing this week is somebody that narrates her own life as the creator and the architect of her own life and her own trajectory. Somebody that makes sure that she's observing what she's letting in and not letting the externals control her. And always asking myself, is this truly something that I want to do? Because when you ask yourself those questions, I assure you, it will be so much more sustainable and it will feel so much more fulfilling. I also wanted to just let you know that I'll probably be creating a little bit more of these shorter episodes, especially as I transition into employment, as I am officially no longer a student, and just my life is in a little bit more of a transition, and my days are going to look a little bit different. So thank you so much for sticking with me. I will probably be doing more bi-weekly episodes than weekly episodes, but I'm definitely still here, and this is still something that I really do want to prioritize, because I think these topics are so important for just navigating your life and really gaining some perspective into how to utilize these concepts to be applicable to your life and change your life and gain that agency over what you want to be and who you want to become. So just wanted to put that out there. But thanks again for listening. Again, I am so passionate about this, and this is what I want to do. So I'm definitely not going anywhere. It's just going to look a little bit different. But this week, definitely screenshot a question that sat with you, and also send this episode to somebody who maybe needs to hear it and who's dealing with a little bit of an identity crisis. Definitely tag me. I want to know which one landed. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Comment below your thoughts, questions, and suggestions as well. And subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts from, as it helps support me in knowing what you guys like and hopefully create more topics that resonate with you. And yeah, thanks so much for listening again. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.